The soft hum of a piano filled the cozy atmosphere of a small cafe nestled in the heart of New York City. Ethan Graves, CEO of a leading tech company, stepped inside, his tailored suit pristine, yet his eyes carried the weight of a long day. He had only planned to grab a coffee before heading back to the office, but then a melody stopped him in his tracks. It wasn't a song one would hear often. In fact, it was unique. The very same song Rebecca Carter, his fiancée who had vanished 6 years ago, used to sing whenever she was happy or lost in thought while cooking. Ethan's entire body went rigid. He turned, scanning the cafe for the source of the tune. At the far end of the counter, a waitress with chestnut brown hair wiped the bar, absent-mindedly humming. His pulse pounded. It was her. But no, it couldn't be. Rebecca had disappeared 6 years ago. Every search had led to nothing. No traces, no messages. Ethan moved closer, his breath hitching as he studied the woman. Her features, so hauntingly familiar yet just out of reach. The way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the subtle way her lips parted in concentration. It was Rebecca. And yet, something about her felt untouchable, like a dream he couldn't grasp. He hesitated before speaking. "Excuse me, may I ask your name?" The woman turned to him, her warm brown eyes meeting his. She offered a polite smile. "I'm Lena Hart." In that moment, it felt like Ethan's world had shattered. If this truly was Rebecca, why didn't she recognize him? If she had never died, then what had happened to her for the past 6 years? He couldn't just walk away from this. Ethan knew he had to find the truth. Ethan sat frozen, his coffee untouched as it grew cold. But he didn't care. His eyes remained locked on Lena, or rather, Rebecca, the woman he had once loved, the woman who had vanished without a trace 6 years ago. She moved effortlessly through the cafe, flashing warm smiles at customers, chatting with coworkers. Not a single sign of recognition crossed her face. But that wasn't possible. A person couldn't just change overnight. Something had happened to her. As Lena finished her shift, Ethan knew he couldn't let her walk away. Not again. He waited outside, watching as she stepped onto the crowded sidewalk. "Lena!" His voice cut through the evening air. She turned, eyes widening in surprise. "Do I know you?" Ethan swallowed hard, steadying himself. "I'm sorry if this seems strange, but I think I know you. Or at least, I used to." Lena frowned, a flicker of unease passing over her face. "I think you have the wrong person. We've never met before." Ethan shook his head, his hands trembling as he pulled out his phone. He scrolled quickly, finding the photo he needed. The one of him and Rebecca, taken just weeks before she disappeared. He held the screen up for her to see. "Look at this. You and the woman in this picture, you're identical." Lena glanced at it, and for the briefest moment she froze. A flicker of something, recognition, confusion, passed through her eyes before she quickly shook her head. "Nope, I don't know her, I don't know you. I really have to go." She turned and hurried away, but Ethan had seen it. The hesitation, the tiny moment of doubt that betrayed her. She might not remember, but her reaction didn't lie. As Ethan tightened his grip on his phone, a chilling realization settled over him. If Lena truly was Rebecca, then someone had made sure she forgot who she was. And he wasn't about to let this go. He needed answers. Ethan couldn't sleep that night. The memory of Rebecca and the fleeting look of hesitation in Lena's eyes haunted him. He couldn't brush this off as mere coincidence. If Lena really was Rebecca, then what had happened to her, and why didn't she remember him? The next morning, Ethan sought out Mason Blake, a private investigator he had worked with before. Mason had been the lead detective in Rebecca's missing person case 6 years ago. When Ethan explained the situation, Mason raised an eyebrow. "So you're telling me your missing fiancée just magically reappeared, working as a waitress in a cafe with no memory of you?" Ethan clenched his jaw. "I know it sounds crazy, but I saw her. There's no way two people could look that identical." Mason studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I'll run a background check on her." Within a few hours, Mason returned with something that left Ethan stunned. "She doesn't have any records before 6 years ago," Mason said, dropping a folder onto the desk. "No address history, no identification, nothing before she appeared in New York." Ethan flipped through the documents, his chest tightening with every word. Lena Hart had been found unconscious on the side of a remote road outside a small town. No ID, no belongings. When she woke up after 2 weeks in a coma, she had no memory of who she was. Ethan's stomach twisted. Rebecca had lost her memory. But was it an accident, or had someone wanted her to disappear? Ethan looked up, his expression dark. "We need to find out the truth. Rebecca, or Lena, had lost her memory." But what troubled Ethan the most was why. Mason continued digging into the reports from the town where Lena had been found. The police report stated that she had been discovered unconscious near an empty road. No signs of assault, but indications that she had fallen from a considerable height. But if it was just an accident, why had no one come looking for her? While Ethan pieced together the clues, Lena began to feel like she was being watched. One night, after finishing her shift at the café, she had the eerie sensation of eyes following her. She quickened her pace, but a voice stopped her in her tracks. "You'd be wise to leave the past alone." Lena spun around, but there was no one there. Her heartbeat pounded in her chest. Was it just paranoia, or had someone truly warned her to stop searching for answers? Shaken, she pulled out her phone and dialed the only number she could think of. Ethan arrived within minutes, and the moment he saw the fear on her face, he knew this was real. He placed his hands firmly on her shoulders, his gaze unwavering. "Lena, trust me, I won't let anything happen to you." Lena looked into his eyes, and something stirred deep inside her, a flicker of familiarity she couldn't explain. She didn't remember him, but being near him felt safe. Ethan clenched his fists. If someone wanted to keep Lena in the dark, it only meant that the truth they were chasing was dangerous, and he wouldn't stop until he uncovered it all. Lena couldn't sleep. The cryptic warning from the night before kept echoing in her mind. She told herself maybe it was just a prank, but deep down, she knew better. Someone didn't want her remembering. The next morning, Ethan brought her to Mason's office. They sat around a desk, Mason flipping through an old file. "I found this," Mason said, sliding a photograph toward Lena. Her breath hitched. It was an old picture of her. She was wearing a white dress, standing on a rooftop terrace of a luxury hotel. The scene felt strangely familiar, but when she tried to remember, her head spun with dizziness. Ethan rested a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Take it slow. Don't force it." Lena closed her eyes, and then fragments of a memory flooded back. She remembered the night before her wedding to Ethan. She had stood on the rooftop, feeling nervous but happy. Then, a voice called from behind. "Rebecca." She turned and saw Sophia Dawson, her cousin. But instead of a warm smile, Sophia's eyes were cold, filled with envy. "You don't deserve him." Lena took a cautious step back. "What are you talking about?" Sophia stepped closer. "Ethan should be with me, don't you see?" And before Lena could react, Sophia shoved her. Darkness consumed her. Lena's eyes snapped open, her entire body trembling. She turned to Ethan, panic-stricken. "I remember." Ethan held his breath. "What do you remember?" Lena clenched her fists. "Sophia. She's the one who made me disappear." Ethan stared at Lena, trying to suppress the fury rising inside him. Sophia. The woman Rebecca once considered family. The woman he had once trusted. Lena was still trembling, but there was determination in her eyes. "We have to confront her." Ethan clenched his fists. "I'm not letting you anywhere near her." Mason, who had been quiet until now, simply raised an eyebrow. "I can find Sophia, but if we're going to take her down, we need proof." Ethan nodded. He didn't just want to confront Sophia, he wanted to destroy her. It only took a few hours for Mason to track her down. Sophia was still living in luxury, attending high-profile events, and tonight she would be at a gala at the Paramount Hotel. Lena looked at Ethan. "Are you sure about this?" Ethan nodded. "I'm not letting you live in the dark for another second." The Paramount Hotel gleamed under the warm golden lights. Ethan and Lena stepped inside, their hearts pounding as they closed in on Sophia. And then they saw her. Sophia stood in the center of the ballroom, a glass of wine in hand, laughing as if she hadn't stolen 6 years of Lena's life. Then their eyes met. Sophia's face paled. Lena took a step forward, her heartbeat drumming in her ears. The crowd seemed to fade away until it was just the two of them. "You stole 6 years of my life," she said, her voice quiet but razor sharp. "Now, let's see if you can talk your way out of this." Sophia froze, as if she had just seen a ghost. The wine glass in her hand trembled, but she quickly regained her composure. "Rebecca? No, that's impossible. You're dead." Lena stepped closer, her voice like a blade. "I'm not dead, Sophia, but you tried to make sure I was." People around them started to take notice. Sophia glanced around, lowering her voice, forcing a fake smile. "I don't know what you're talking about." Ethan stepped forward, his gaze burning into her. "Then let me remind you." He pulled out his phone, playing an audio recording from Mason's investigation. A witness from 6 years ago had seen Sophia push Lena. Sophia went pale, but she still tried to mask her panic. Lena held her stare. "Why? Why did you do this to me?" Sophia let out a bitter laugh, but fear flickered behind her eyes. "Because you always had everything, and I hated you for it." Everything snapped into place. Sophia couldn't escape this time. Behind them, the sound of footsteps echoed. Mason approached, nodding at Ethan. "Game over, Sophia." Sophia was escorted away by the police, her face twisted in anger but powerless to stop it. Lena stood still, watching as the woman who had once been her cousin disappeared. Deep down, she still struggled to believe Sophia had been capable of such cruelty. Ethan gently touched her hand. "Are you okay?" Lena took a deep breath. "I don't know." She had reclaimed her memories, but that didn't mean everything could go back to the way it was. She turned to Ethan. "Rebecca Carter disappeared 6 years ago, Ethan. She doesn't exist anymore." Ethan held her gaze for a long moment before saying softly, "I don't care if you're Rebecca Carter or Lena Hart. I only care about the woman standing in front of me." Lena felt something tighten in her chest. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing she did know, she wasn't alone anymore. For the first time, she reached for Ethan's hand with certainty. "Then let's start over." Ethan smiled. "There's nothing I'd want more." Under the city lights, they walked forward, stepping into a new chapter together. After everything, Ethan knew he couldn't rush her. He had once loved Rebecca Carter with all his heart, but now, standing before him was Lena, a woman with the same face, but a heart full of missing pieces. She didn't remember him, but that didn't matter. Ethan decided to love her all over again, as if they were meeting for the first time. Every morning, he stopped by her café, ordering the same thing, with one special request: a cappuccino and a smile from the most beautiful barista here. Lena shook her head, chuckling. "Do you always say such ridiculous things?" Ethan shrugged, eyes twinkling with mischief. "Only to you." They took walks in the park, where Ethan told her stories of their past. At first, Lena listened like they were nothing more than fairy tales. But then, the memories started trickling back, piece by piece. One evening, as they cooked dinner together, Ethan clumsily dropped a plate of eggs onto the floor. Lena laughed, until she suddenly stopped. "Wait," she murmured, her hands gripping the counter for balance. A sudden wave of déjà vu crashed over her. This has happened before." Ethan froze. "Do you remember something?" Lena nodded slowly, as if a door in her mind had just creaked open. A year passed, and Lena slowly regained all her memories. She remembered the way Ethan used to hold her, the way his eyes lit up whenever she smiled. She remembered the promises they had made, the love they had fought for. But most importantly, she realized that whether she was Rebecca Carter or Lena Hart, she loved him all the same. And Ethan knew he didn't have to wait any longer. One evening, as the sun dipped into the ocean, Ethan led Lena to the beach, where they had once had their first date. As she admired the golden horizon, he knelt down, holding a sparkling ring. "Rebecca Carter, Lena Hart, no matter what name you go by, you are the woman I have loved in every lifetime. Will you marry me again?" Lena's hands flew to her mouth, tears pooling in her eyes. "Ethan," she whispered. He squeezed her hand gently, his voice full of warmth. "I lost you once, but this time, no matter what happens, I will never let you go again." A soft, breathless laugh escaped her lips as she nodded. "Yes, Ethan, this time I won't make you wait." He slipped the ring onto her finger, pulling her into a deep kiss under the painted sky. On their wedding day, Lena walked down the aisle, her heart pounding. Not from fear, but from pure happiness. Ethan stood at the altar, his eyes never leaving her. When it was time for their vows, Ethan held her hands, his voice steady yet filled with emotion. "The first time I met you, I knew you were my forever. The second time I met you, you didn't remember me. But that didn't matter because I would still love you, whether you were Rebecca or Lena. And from this day forward, I will never lose you again." Lena couldn't stop the tears from falling. With a kiss, they sealed their love once more, this time forever. 2 years later, Ethan held Lena's hand as she lay exhausted in the hospital bed. The cries of their twin daughters filled the room, and as Ethan held them for the first time, his heart swelled with a love he never knew he was capable of. "We did it," he whispered, kissing Lena's forehead. She smiled weakly but radiated happiness. 3 years later, their daughters had grown into bright-eyed, energetic little girls. The house was never quiet, filled with laughter, playful giggles, and the occasional mess of crayons on the walls. And now, on this quiet afternoon, Ethan and Lena sat side by side, watching their children chase fireflies in the golden dusk. Lena leaned her head against Ethan's shoulder. "We've come such a long way." Ethan gently squeezed her hand. "And I'll walk with you until the very end." She let out a soft sigh, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Ethan set his tea down and wrapped an arm around her waist. "I never imagined I could be this happy." Lena turned her gaze toward their daughters, watching as one tripped and the other helped her up. She reached for Ethan's hand, intertwining their fingers. "Because in the end, we have everything." In the distance, the sun dipped below the horizon, wrapping their little world in a golden embrace. They had found each other, and this time, nothing would ever tear them apart again.